Senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call in progress be vitiated.
Without objection.
And I ask unanimous consent that I be recognized for 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, today I'm reintroducing a bill that I had introduced with then Senator Hillary Clinton on two other previous occasions. It's interesting because this bill really didn't have a lot of opposition. It did have some opposition from the Bush administration, because what we're attempting to do is to take the Federal Emergency Management Agency out from under where it was put in the Department of Homeland Security by the previous administration, and give it independent status. This is something that is has been talked about for a long period of time. And we can draw from our experience in Oklahoma back when we had a devastating tornado going through, like we did last night, although it was even worse. It killed many, many people. At that time, James Lee Witt was the FEMA director. That was President Clinton's appointment. I always remember when that happened. When it happened, a matter of hours after it happened, I called him up and he met me in Oklahoma. We got it done. At that time, it was under the Environment Public Works Committee. It was under the Stafford Act, actually, so it had virtually independent status at that time. Now, only a few months ago, General Russell Horner, the general placed in charge of the military's relief efforts following Hurricane Katrina, said that FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security should be separate agencies. In an interview reported in Politico, General Owner had said that FEMA, and this is quoting now, he said, "I just think we've had some experience that demonstrates that the best thing to do is separate it and make it a separate agency." And most importantly, President Obama, in his remarks he delivered in New Orleans in February of last year, he said, quote, "If catastrophe comes, the American people must be able to call on a competent government. A director of FEMA will report to me," this is the president talking now, "as soon as we take office, my FEMA director will work with emergency management officials in all 50 states to create a national response plan, because we need to know before disaster comes who will be in charge and how the federal, state, and local governments will work together to respond." I talked to the president just a few minutes ago. He still has these same feelings, and I think that it's very appropriate now to bring up something that we had talked about before. I know the Democratic platform, for example, has a provision in there that says that the FEMA director will report directly to the president, and I couldn't agree more. I don't agree with a lot of things in the Democrat platform, but I do agree with that. Oklahoma has had more than our share of natural disasters. Only last night, 3 confirmed tornadoes touched down throughout Oklahoma, impacting the communities of Oklahoma City, Edmond, Pawnee, and then a very small community called Lone Grove. In Lone Grove, this very tiny community, 8 people were killed. There are 35 still missing, so I think the death toll, unfortunately, could rise above that. I had occasion to talk to one of the civic leaders there, Gary Hicks, and the city manager, Mariana Elford, only this morning. And it's the number of Lone Grove residents that are missing right now is still not determined. So I think that it's just a real disaster. It wasn't long before that we had the Eagle Pitcher area of Oklahoma was hit by a tornado. And up there is a very similar thing. There are 7 deaths in that case. So just last year, on May 1st, I surveyed the other tornado up there, and that's when Secretary Chertoff and FEMA Director Paulison, Governor Henry, Congressman Boren, where all 7 people were killed, but it didn't go quite as smooth as we would have liked. FEMA's integration into the Department of Homeland Security in 2003 added an extra area or level of layer of bureaucracy and removed much of the autonomy that once kept the agency operating efficiently. We learned in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina that the extra coordination required between the Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Emergency Management Agency was at least partly responsible for the shortcomings of the federal response. I think I went down right after that to Katrina, and I think they did a much better job than the press portrayed. but I still think that the extra level of bureaucracy created a problem in getting things done immediately. My legislation takes the necessary steps of giving the director of FEMA cabinet-level status in the event of natural disasters and acts of terrorism. It makes that person the principal advisor to the President, to the Homeland Security Council, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. So we're kind of reversing it. And he is going to be in the cabinet-level position, so obviously things can be done a lot faster, and I think a lot better. Perhaps more importantly, the legislation defines the primary mission and specific activities of the Federal Emergency Management Agency and its director, and places directly upon them the obligation to ensure FEMA's mission is carried out. Now, it's exactly what the President Obama had said while he was campaigning for president, what he reaffirmed to me today on the telephone. Now, let me explain some other events that originally led me to introduce this legislation. Oklahoma first encountered significant problems with FEMA when wildfires ravaged the state in 2005 and 2006. These devastating wildfires swept through the entire state, leading to declarations of public assistance, individual assistance, and hazard mitigation funding. In January of 2007, Oklahoma encountered severe winter storms with devastating results. These storms led to prolonged loss of power and extensive building damage for many of my constituents. And one of my constituents happened to be my wife. We've been married 49 years, and she was without electricity for 9 days. So that does get your attention. Later this year, Oklahoma was hit by heavy rain, tornadoes, and flooding from May through September of that year. The state made a number of disaster declarations during each of these periods, but each and every time, the process it took to obtain aid from FEMA became increasingly difficult, wrought with indecisiveness and inability of Homeland Security entities to communicate among each other. Well, prior to the placement of FEMA under DHS, my state had not encountered nearly the same level of bureaucratic delays or communications as it has since that time. Oklahoma has also struggled with FEMA regarding the determination of dates of incident periods, which is why I include language in my bill to give deference to the state's documentation regarding the dates of such incidences. Now, some of you guys are not from states where you have the number of disasters that we've had. And so it's something that is you're not as familiar with, but we certainly are. And I see my junior senator on the floor here too. We live through these things on a regular basis. We have tornadoes, we have ice storms, windstorms other people don't have. So anyway, I think that Senator Clinton and I were right when we introduced this the first time, and I believe that it's consistent with what President Obama has reaffirmed to me as recently as today. It'd be a better arrangement. And I will be looking for supporters. We have introduced the bill. It's S412. Again, this bill takes the FEMA out from under DHS and gives it more of an independent status so it can respond in a more rapid way as it did prior to 2003. And with that, I'll yield the floor. Absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.